Welcome to Daily 5 for Tuesday, August 27th, 2024. I've reviewed a couple at least Hammer films in the past, and I've talked about the fact that I'm a big fan of the horror films that the company put out. And I had been under the impression that the company had gone under sometime, I think in the 90s or maybe earlier. So I was surprised when I had seen that there was a new Hammer horror film coming out titled Doctor Jekyll, starring Eddie Izzard. Now, two things. One, I've been a fan of Eddie Izzard for quite a while, so I was very interested to see what she would do in this film. And also, it's not really Hammer films, at least not the Hammer films that a lot of us grew up with. It is basically a very Atari-like situation where somebody has purchased the name and is using it to apparently release new films, starting with this one, as far as I understand. So I thought, okay, well, that's a bit of a gimmick, but regardless, I'm always interested in a good Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde adaptation, so I figured I would watch this. It's available on Amazon for $7, at least in the US, so I thought, okay, $7, that's not bad. Let's see if this is any good. And having now watched the film, I would agree with a lot of reviewers who have pointed out that Eddie Izzard is excellent in the film. By far the best reason to see it. The rest of the movie is serviceable. I would say it does more things right than wrong, but it definitely will... I can't imagine this is going to go down as one of the great Dr. Jekyll adaptations that there's ever been. There are problems with it. I don't necessarily have the same problems that some other people did. I don't think it's as boring as some people make it out to be. I think it definitely backloads the plot. So it sets up things in the beginning, then you have a long stretch in the middle, and then a lot of things happen at the end. And it probably would have made for a better film if the middle had a little bit more going on. Instead, it relies a lot on very tense situations where the character, I can't even remember his name. What was that character's name? The character who's brought in, the basic setup, and this is no spoiler because this happens within the first 10 minutes of the film, is there's a young man who has recently gotten out of prison and is hired on to become a caretaker in Dr. Jekyll's home. Now, Dr. Jekyll is a disgraced CEO of a pharma company who's been accused of abuse and has injured herself at some point and is now living at home and needs somebody to help her out with basic tasks like giving her medication, bringing her meals, that type of thing. And of course, if you know anything about the Dr. Jekyll story, which probably you do from pop culture osmosis, you know that, in fact, Dr. Jekyll has a sinister second side that is going to be made obvious as the film goes on. So we all know that going into this movie. If you didn't already know it, again, from the pop culture knowledge of the character, the trailer would certainly have indicated it. And so there's no real surprise in that particular element of the film. And I think that's where some people got bored in the middle, where the movie is slowly revealing something that, to be honest, most of us already knew. This character who is the caretaker, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the character's name, but I'm going to call him Robbie. I don't know if that's actually his name or not, but Robbie is the one who doesn't know what's going on, but everybody else does. So the middle, where Robbie is discovering that there are things that don't seem right, is played for suspense, but half that suspense is missing because we as the audience already are aware, well aware, of what's going to be happening. So it's not that it's boring, it's just it's not as suspenseful as the movie feels like it should be. That is probably what most people are going to struggle with. But outside of that, I was entertained by it. It did more things right than it did wrong. Again, I don't think it's going to go down as a classic adaptation of this story. That's just because it doesn't do enough new with it, which I'm going to discuss on Friday in the details. I don't want to spoil it. I'm keeping this spoiler free. But I think there were some opportunities for it to really play with the material, and it really doesn't do it. It kind of sticks to an almost routine retelling of this story with one little kind of twist that is never really properly explained, but at least does introduce something new. But outside of that, I wouldn't say it's a bad movie. Once it hits streaming, you don't have to pay anything. I think it's well worth a watch. Whether it's worth $7 to you, I don't feel like I wasted my money. I'm happy I watched it. Eddie Izzard is fantastic in it, and that's reason enough for me to have seen it. But I just don't want anybody to come into this thinking it's some kind of cult classic or that it's a Hammer film reborn. It's really not any of that. It is a perfectly serviceable adaptation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with some new elements, but probably not enough to elevate it for most people. So like I said, when it hits streaming, give it a watch. If you want to pay $7 for Eddie Izzard, I think it's worth it for that. But just don't go in thinking it's something excellent. It's just a good time. Later.